My name's Owen. I'm 32 years old. I'm married for a year now. Me and my wife, we're residing in Long Island. We are living in a rather old house. According to our knowledge, we're the fourth owner of the estate, existed for 30 years now. As all newlyweds, we're not rich, so both of us decided to pick up this estate, being the most affordable for us. The house is rather sturdy, even after many decades. The only catch was its rather old-fashioned design. Whoever built this lodging and owned it first must be someone rather wealthy. However, after 6 months residing here, there were strange things that occurred to us that defied all logical explanation. One evening, my wife and I were having our time watching movies in the living room. It was a rom-com, which was ruined at the climactic moment as I noticed something in the corner of my eyes, enough to startle me to a yelp. "What's going on?" My wife, also startled, asked me back. "There's a pale woman behind the TV, hun." She just laughed it off, saying that I'm seeing things, despite the fact that I have tried to describe that woman for her. Pale white figure, sunken eyes, but she wasn't buying it, telling me that I was hallucinating things that weren't there. Another time, I had to relieve myself in the middle of the night. When I was in front of the sink and watching myself in the mirror, she came to me again. She was right there behind my back, and this time I was able to see her more clearly. Emaciated, pale, with sunken eyes. The sight was more than enough to send me running to a panic attack. The third time I saw her was when I was cleaning the floor. She was walking rather heavily, slowly toward the basement behind the main house. She was wearing a long dress, a type of which went out of fashion many years ago, singing along the way, with her haunting voice echoing along the hallways. She looked pregnant with swollen abdomen. This time my wife did consider what I told her, but she instead thought of me having psychological issues due to overworking. Why the heck am I the only person seeing things when my wife's immune to that shit? So I decided to purchase a more modern house in downtown area with a 20-year payment plan terms. I would go nuts staying here any longer. The house now I'll redecorate and put it for rent. To fasten the paces, I chose the hourly rate cleaning service. There were too many things to clean up here, so it took more than a day to complete. With cleaning up complete, we have finally decided on what to carry forward and what to discard. However, the two cleaning staffs said about a rather heavy metal chest in the basement that they would like to have me help in carrying it upstairs. I knew about this chest the day we moved in, but due to it being very heavy, we decided to leave it there for good. It took all four of us a lot of work to finally haul it out of the basement area. With things finally arranged, except for the heavy chest, we could finally rest. Tomorrow I'd deal with it. Likely it would need to be towed away. That was our final night here at the old house. However, weird things started to come up again. There's a lot of creepy sounds coming from the metal chest. First was the weeping of a woman. Then came loud bangs echoing from within the chest. Last but not least, the wailing of a child wheezing from within the accursed object. I could barely sleep while my wife sleeping soundly that night. The next morning, having enough of it, I decided to open it up. My wife nagged at me for being unreasonable, but I couldn't stand it any longer. I felt an urge to open it up, to come to terms with all of my suffering. So I pried it open with all my strength. A nasty smell from within assaulted my sense of smell, gagged me up, forced me to vomit under such nauseating stench. My wife threw me a look of concern. For her, I was being unreasonable, and now was reaping the consequences. After calming myself down, I decided to look inside the chest, and immediately regret that decision. The first thing I saw was human feet, then arms, and finally, a human face. All was submerged within a fluid of something like paint. Now thinking back, I wished I did have a mental issue like my wife said. At least I could forget what I'd seen there. So I called the police, fighting the nausea the entire time. The police said it was the body of a woman. She was heavily pregnant at the 9th month by the time she was dead. Needless to say, we were in a state of shock and panic at the news. She was found shrunken to a fetal position, still clutching within the out-of-fashion long dress. The same one that I had seen her in the mirror with. After thorough examinations, they found the chest originated from an industrial factory only 12 miles away. However, the chest model was out of commission a decade ago already. Me and my wife, we also provided the information of the previous owner to the police. They quickly found the third and second owner after backtracking, tracing it up to the very first owner. The two previous owners claimed that the chest had always been there when they moved in. That thing, however, was so heavy that they all decided to just leave it there, and then it was forgotten. So the police searched for the first owner. His name's Thomas, the builder of this house, and also the owner of that previously mentioned factory. However, he'd passed away 3 years ago due to a heart attack. Thomas had a wife and a son who's almost 30 years old now. After mentioning about the body in the chest, they claimed no knowledge about that. Thomas divorced his wife when his son was only 4 years of age. She's been living away for all this time, only receiving alimony arrangement from her previous husband. Because it was related to Thomas, the body within was likely his mistress. So the police suggested a DNA test of the unborn child and Thomas's son. The match was solid at 25%. They were indeed half-siblings. The case, however, was only 50% completed. There's still a lot of questions going unanswered, like who's the killer and what's the motive for the killing. But the most haunting for me was when I was looking at Thomas's picture. He and I were uncannily familiar. I'm Richard, 29 years old. I work as a driver for the ride-sharing company Uber. Currently, I live with my grandmother in a small house in San Francisco. Here, the demand for ride-sharing services from people is very high. I might be able to scrape out a living for me and my grandmother. If there's no important matter, I'll work every day from 9 a.m. to 10 p.m. One weekend evening, I had almost no passengers for the whole day. At 10 p.m. when I was about to end my workday, suddenly the app showed a ride request. Looking at the distance, it was quite far, in the suburban area. But since I didn't have many passengers all day, I gladly decided to accept the ride. The passenger's location was about a mile from where I was standing. I started moving to pick up the passenger. When I arrived at the exact location, there was no one around. I felt quite anxious, thinking of calling the customer. Suddenly, a girl appeared out of nowhere, bending down to look through the car window and smiling at me. I startled. I dropped my phone, taking a few seconds to process everything. I quickly got out of the car to greet the girl, but I began to feel uneasy. She, with long tousled hair, wearing a long white dress, holding a doll. It wasn't an ordinary doll. Its face was haunting with large black eyes covering half of its face. It was more terrifying than the Annabelle doll in the horror movie I watched. As I was lost in my thoughts about the doll, suddenly the girl spoke. "Take me home, please." Her voice was very soft, giving a gloomy feeling as if echoing from the depths of hell. I felt a surge of cold air running down my spine. I nervously chuckled and opened the car door for her. But she looked at me with amusement, and then proceeded to open the door and sit in the back seat. I quickly sat in the driver's seat and started the car. Even though I'm a 29-year-old guy with a fairly tall stature, in that situation, I'm sure anyone would be as shaken as I was. I drove, my body drenched in sweat even though the air conditioning in the car was on. As I was about to stop at a red light, that girl uttered that scary voice again. "What if we run the red light? If you get fined, I'll pay, don't worry." After saying that, she chuckled, and I also laughed out loud to dispel that ominous atmosphere. But my laughter stuck in my throat. I said I'm a law-abiding person, so I wouldn't do that. "You're such a coward, but living people are usually like that, unlike me." Again, that teasing laughter, but it was really not amusing at all. My body was cold, but I kept sweating. All I could do was to gulp and stay as calm as possible. I remained silent, trying to drive a bit faster to end this ride. Occasionally, I glanced at the rearview mirror to check on the back seat. "Focus on driving, please," that gentle voice echoed, making me startle, instantly stiffening my body. Suddenly, there was a desperate scream, and reflexively I turned back to look. A grotesque face with bulging white eyes full of red veins, the mouth screaming loudly, was inches from my face. The horror I felt at that moment cannot be described. I panicked and screamed loudly. Fortunately, the sharp reflexes of a driver helped me step on the brake correctly, instead of the gas pedal. The girl, holding the doll with the grotesque face, fell back into the back seat, laughing hysterically. I still hadn't recovered. My heavy breathing only seemed to excite her even more. Do living people get startled like that? What on earth was happening to me? I didn't know if I was carrying a person, a ghost, or mentally unstable. Seeing that I didn't say anything, discomfort was evident on her face. She twisted the doll's head back to its original position, with the black eyes as before, then dirtied it. She said she just wanted to play a little. I had thought of ending this ride here. The girl pointed forward, saying we were almost home, and I just needed to drive a little further. Having come this far, I reconsidered and continued driving. Now, whether it was a person or a ghost or anything else, I didn't care anymore. When we reached where she called home, I stopped, got out of the car politely, and opened the door. She stepped out, smiling at me. Now I looked closely. She was extremely beautiful, with a bright, innocent, and very attractive smile. The ride cost $40, and she handed me a $100 bill, saying there was no need to return the change. I thanked her and was about to turn and leave, but looking around, it was a dark dirt road with no houses around. I asked her if she was sure this was home. She laughed and said someone from her family would come to pick her up right now. I looked down and saw her standing on the ground with both feet and casting a shadow on the road under the car's headlights. I breathed a sigh of relief, reassuring myself that this wasn't a ghost. But I couldn't leave her alone like that, so I decided to stay with her until her family came to pick her up. A moment later, a luxurious Rolls-Royce arrived. The girl waved to me and got into the car. Only now did I understand what had happened. I also got in the car and drove in the opposite direction. Looking in the rearview mirror, my mind kept thinking about that girl. Now I remembered I hadn't asked her name. But just a few seconds later, when I looked back, the Rolls-Royce had disappeared into the night. I didn't know when. I couldn't be sure if everything was a dream or real, nor could I tell if that girl was a human or a ghost. I've heard and watched many stories and movies about supernatural phenomena, but I never thought I would encounter such an inexplicable phenomena in real life.